This is my history video for the history final, and it will be on the Motown Records, Jimmy Hoffa, and the history of Corktown. So starting with Motown Records, it was an American record label owned by Universal Music Group, and it was originally founded by Berry Gordy Jr. as Tamala Records on January 12, 1959. And it was incorporated as Motown Record Corporation on April 14th, 1960. Its name of Motor and Town has become a nickname for Detroit, where the label was originally headquartered. Motown played an important role in the racial integration of popular music as an African American owned label and achieved significant crossover success. In the 1960s, Motown and its subsidiary labels were the most successful proponents of what came to be known as the Motown sound, a style of soul music with a distinct pop influence. Motown was the most successful record label of soul music with a net worth totaling $61 million. Following the events of the Detroit riots of 1967 and the loss of key songwriting team Holland Dozier Holland, and the same year over pay disputes, Gordy began relocating Motown to Los Angeles, California. The move was completed in 1972, and Motown later expanded into film and television production, remaining an independent company until 1994, when it was sold to Polygram before being sold again to MCA Records. MCA Records' successor, Universal Music Group, when it acquired Polygram in 1999. Next, we have Jimmy Hoffa. And Jimmy Hoffa was born on February 14th, 1913. He was an American labor union leader who served as president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Teamsters Union from 1957 until 1971, and he vanished in late July 1975 at the age of 62. From an early age, Hoffa was a union activist and became an important regional figure with the IBT, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, by his mid-20s. By 1952, he was the national vice president of the IBT and was its general president between 1957 and 1971. He secured the first national agreement for Teamsters rates in 1964 with the National Master Freight Agreement. He played a major role in the growth and development of the union, which eventually became the largest in the United States, with over 2.3 million members at its peak during his terms as leader. Hoffa became involved with organized crime from the early years of his Teamsters work, and his connection continued until his disappearance in 1975. He was convicted of jury tampering, attempted bribery, and fraud in 1964 in two separate trials. He was imprisoned in 1967 and sentenced to 13 years in mid-1971. He resigned as president of the union as part of a pardon agreement with President Richard Nixon, and he was released later that year, though barred from union activities until 1980. Hoffa, hoping to regain support and to return to IBT leadership, unsuccessfully attempted to overturn his order. Hoffa vanished in late July 1975 and was declared legally dead in 1982. Now, the history of Corktown. So, Corktown is the oldest existing neighborhood in Detroit, Michigan, though it is only half as old as the city itself. In the 1820s and 30s, with the opening of the Erie Canal and the decreased cost of steamboat travel on the Great Lakes, Immigrants began arriving in Detroit in significant numbers and settling downtown. As the number of Irish immigrants increased, they began to move west of downtown Detroit into the area known as Corktown, named after County Cork, Ireland. By the early 1850s, half of the residents of the Eighth Ward were of Irish descent. Historically, the neighborhood was roughly bounded by 3rd Street to the east, Grand River Avenue to the north, and 12th Street to the west, and Jefferson Avenue to the south. Initially, detached homes and row houses in the Federal style were built, a reflection of the architectural fashion of the time. As the area's population grew, modest 1- and 2-story Victorian townhouses with Gothic and Queen Anne features joined the earlier buildings. Though by the 1890s, an increasingly affluent Irish population was scattered throughout the city, and Corktown became home to other ethnic communities. Around 1900, 3 men from the island of Malta settled there, and a number of their countrymen followed. After World War I, plentiful auto industry jobs brought immigrants in with great numbers, many of them settling in Corktown. In the 1920s, Latino populations arriving from the Southwest and Mexico came to Corktown seeking work in Detroit's auto factories. Following World War II, city planners proposed demolishing large swaths of the neighborhood for factories. 75 acres of Corktown homes and businesses were demolished, and hundreds of residents were displaced in preparation for industrial expansion. The planned industrial development never came to fruition, however, and there were no plans to build new homes in the area. Corktown suffered further in the 1960s when the urban renewal construction of the Lodge Freeway and Business District section was listed on the National Register of Corktown suffered further in the 1960s when the urban renewal construction of the Lodge Freeway and Business District encroachment swallowed up or flattened dozens of residential blocks. The remaining residential section was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in July of 1978 and is designated as a historic district of the city of Detroit. And that was my video for the final, including Motown, the story of Jimmy Hoffa, and the history of Corktown.